Hello and welcome to the Indian Express, to this special broadcast analyzing the budget. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has just completed tabling the budget for the next financial year. And there were a lot of challenges in front of the economy coming out of the COVID pandemic. The budget that she has presented has several aspects that we need to unpack. And let us just, first of all, get started with the first person to analyze and give us the initial feedback on what the budget presented. Let me invite Sunny Verma, who tracks the finance ministry. Sunny, what did you make of the high points of the budget? What are the main highlights?
Yeah. So the key to the budget is that this is an investment-led budget where the finance minister has sought to increase capital expenditure, which essentially goes in creation of assets, income generating assets and infrastructure creation by 35.4%, which is a big jump of about 2 lakh crore rupees compared to last year. So it comes to around 7.5 lakh crore of capex that they are going to undertake next year. Now, the key to this will be execution, what kind of projects are chosen, whether it's actually implemented and spent on the ground, because capex also leads to high multiplier effect in the economy, driving other industries, demand for other industries. So while there is no conspicuous demand push in that sense, but money is being put on investment. So say housing projects, this tap water schemes get funding of more than 1 lakh crores. And another interesting thing in the budget is that they have now done away with they have announced that they will do away with the issue of bank guarantees that companies have to provide while undertaking infra projects. So over the spread of national infrastructure pipeline till 2025, this will lead to an estimated rupees 8 lakh crore of money which will be freed up for private companies so that they can use in the projects itself. The other key aspect is that MSMEs have been now again hit by the Omicron wave and sporadic lockdowns in states. So they required some support. So the emergency credit line guarantee scheme, which essentially provides a government guaranteed credit to stressed MSMEs, that has been extended by 1 year and the amount has been increased by 50,000 crores. So this will help the struggling MSMEs to survive, and with this investment and demand that will come up during the year, hopefully they will emerge out of this sort of problem. So as we have seen that some components of the services sector and services industry are still pretty much below the pre-pandemic levels in terms of the output, almost 9% below. So they have to regain that output, and this will help them. So it's a combination of investment push and also ensuring private financing for the companies through removal of bank guarantees and this push of MSMEs, which is crucial. I think this forms the crux of the budget, apart from other procedural initiatives that have been announced. Yes.
Right, thanks. So, I just wanted to tell the viewers that going into the budget, the finance minister had a tough balancing act in front of her. Private consumption had been struggling in India, but the Modi government has been, since the start of the second term, been very assiduously pushing the supply side of the economy, increasing ways and means in which the businesses can take part and take the lead in growth recovery. And the capex push that Sunny talked about is the big story today. The kind of capital expenditure, which has a massive multiplier in terms of GDP growth, is the big story of this budget. Some may disagree with what was required in this current scenario where people are still struggling, but we'll come to that. Let me first now go to, and let me also ask viewers, if you have any questions, please, for any of our panelists, you can send it to us in the chat, and we'll try to get them answered. Let me now first go to Sandeep Singh, who's the resident editor in Mumbai, and he tracks the markets and the business environment. So, Sandeep, what do you make of the budget? Is this the best thing that could have happened for business environment and the markets?
Hi, Udit. Yeah, I mean, as markets reflected initially, I mean, during the course of FM's budget presentation speech, we saw it held on to the gains during the day as it started with the Asian markets, not in line with Asian markets. But yes, it held on to it. So there is a lot of optimism, hope, and we saw the banking index. I mean, and the metals and cement companies. I mean, how their stocks reacted. It was primarily driven by what was the announcement on capex for, and especially mostly on infrastructure led. I mean, there have been big 5 or 6 announcements, national level projects and all that. So yes, I mean, capex is the big story, and which is what the markets were enthused about. However, I mean, there are some concerns too, especially, and which is why, I mean, it lost. Now if you see, I mean, they have shed around 700-800 points of the gains that they had earlier. The concern is on the fiscal deficit aspect. Fiscal deficit, basically, that 6.4%. So consolidation is something that maybe foreign investors look for, and that has come as a concern, which is why there is some sell-off there going on in the market. So yes, I mean, while the big story in the medium to long term that will be there is the big capex push on the infrastructure. But there are some concerns on the fiscal consolidation. Yeah, that is there. Then
on the digital currency, that was a massive news point. What do you think of that?
Yeah, digital currency. I mean, we all knew that it was coming, but yes, I mean, since the announcement has come now, and RBI will take it forward in this year, it's going to come out. It is expected to take the government's digitization move to the next level. I mean, the introduction of CBDC will reduce further dependency on cash, lower transaction cost, and settlement risk and all. And on the other aspect, I mean, the move to kind of tax the virtual assets, a 30% tax, which has been imposed along with a 1% TDS over a threshold of the transaction limit. I mean, this also now one clarity, even though we are waiting for the bill for on the digital assets. I mean, it gives some clarity on how they will be treated. So they will be treated as assets. And there is some clarity on that now. It is also, I think, I would see it as a some sort of not we can't say a booster, but something for the stock investments, basically, because this is getting treated at 30%, and you have equities long-term capital gains tax at 10%. So obviously there is some arbitrage there, because a lot of money was moving from stocks to cryptos also over the last couple of years that we've seen. So yes, to that aspect now, since there's a 30% tax there.
So if you were planning to buy into cryptos, is this good news for you that the government has now formally recognized them and sort of legalized them?
Yeah,
or is this bad news that they're taxing it?
Yeah, both good and bad news. Good in the sense that there is a legitimization to an aspect, and we will await for the bill to come and give full clarity on which digital currencies will get the legitimacy. I mean, but to an extent, yes, it does provide legitimacy, because there'll be taxes to be paid on it. But at the on the other hand, investors will fret about this, the tax being imposed and the TDS being there. But yes, I mean, the tracking will become easier because of the TDS aspect. Now the government can know, I mean, who's investing how much and where. Yeah.
Right. Now, let me come to Harish Damodaran, who's the National Editor for Rural Affairs and tracks farm sector very closely. Harish, farm distress was something that was massive going into this budget. What did you make of that? Was there any indication that the government is trying to devise a new strategy to engage with the farmers or on the agriculture front?
This is a remarkably non-political budget. You know, I mean, given the fact that the UP elections, Punjab elections are just, days away. I mean, there's absolutely nothing, I mean, as far as farmers are concerned, reaching out. I mean, you only have natural farming, I mean, which I don't think farmers on the ground would be too much excited about that, So it's in that way, it's a remarkable budget. I mean, there's absolutely no, like you look at, for example, NG Narega, the outlay actually has come down. Okay, I expected that there will be an increase in PM Kisan, the DBT right now. Right now, it's say 6,000 rupees. I expected that it might go up to say 9,000 rupees, and maybe they would raise resources by maybe capping MSP procurement, raising PDS issue price, bringing urea under the nutrient-based subsidy, which you don't announce in the budget, So whereas you announce an increase in PM Kisan and then don't provide much for food subsidy and those kind of things. But that has not happened. So, which means it's very clear that Modi is probably keeping the gunpowder dry for 2024. There's no income tax cut either, right? I mean, so it's very clear that either BJP is very confident of winning this election, or they don't see the need for investing political capital in this election. I thought that was the most significant thing in this budget.
Right.
Then I'm a little, I mean, I think the food subsidy, they have not fully provided for.
Yeah, I think all the subsidy, I was looking at all the subsidy numbers, food, fertilizer, all have come down. All the budget estimates.
No, but and the revised estimates don't provide fully actually, because you've had an extension of the Pradhan Mantri that Anna Yojana, Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. You extended it till March, and I think that itself should have cost about 1.5 lakh crore. So that's not being provided for, So which I think is again some kind of a negative, So clearly it's not being provided for, and even in the coming year there's not much this thing. I think the overall assumption is that 2022-23 will be a normal year. There'll be no COVID, etc. So you get back the economy to normal. You have normal economic activity. But say, for example, the FMCG players, say an HUL or somebody would be very disappointed with this budget because there's nothing for consumption, right? I mean, whether income tax, so for the consumers, to feel good, there's nothing. The whole thing is sort of capital expenditure kind of thing. So it's a abnormally normal budget. That's what I would say.
Right.
Thanks.
I'll come back to the issue of salaried class, but let us first go to Aanchal magazine, who tracks the finance ministry and can give us a sense, Aanchal, about the taxation. Capital expenditure is the big news today, and frankly, nobody would have expected that 2 lakh crores of capital expenditure would increase. So, where is the government getting the money from? What's happening on the revenue front? Any sense you can give us?
Yeah, revenue collections are very buoyant, as the finance minister also used that term for buoyancy. And we are seeing the buoyancy not only for direct taxes, we are seeing for indirect taxes also. And it would be they are defying the trend, because usually direct tax collections were getting revised down in the revised estimates. And this time the RE is actually 12.8% higher than the budget estimates. For direct taxes, we are actually at 12.5 lakh crore has been now put in the revised figures, as against the 11.08 lakh crore initially. Of course, there were the targets were kept at a modest level last year, because we had just emerged from the pandemic, and in the middle of the pandemic, of course, government was not too optimistic about the revenue buoyancy, but revenues have picked up. Which a lot of economists and experts have actually pointed out over the course of the year, that it points out to greater, we could call it formalization, or actually these smaller enterprises losing out to bigger enterprises. That's where a certain portion of the corporate tax buoyancy is also getting reflected from. But even on the GST revenue side, we have seen yesterday the latest numbers came in for January at 1.38 lakh crore, very close to the highest number of 1.39 lakh crore. And that is what the FM also pointed out. And probably one of the reasons now that they can see a regular flow of revenue stream is there, a buoyancy is there. And now with economy opening up more and more, and expected to do better in the coming year, Of course, revenues are expected to do better. That's why probably they have not really provided any relief on income tax slabs or income tax front, because that's where the money will come in for the government to spend for their other side for capex.
Right. And on the fiscal deficit, is this, as Sandeep was mentioning, that there were some concerns in some sectors of the market that fiscal deficit is high, but what is your sense on the fiscal deficit? Was this par for the course? Was this expected 6.4 for next year?
Yeah, of course, it is very much in line with expectations. I think in the middle of the year itself, if everybody was seeing that the tax collections were, going in line with the budget targets. So, and then we saw the nominal GDP also being estimated at a very high level from the NSO also. So this is more or less in line with the expectations.
Okay. Now, it seems like there's good news for businesses. Government is trying to crowd in a lot of private investment, and government is promising to push in a lot of its own money to boost productivity in the country. But, just like in the economic survey, there was, even in the budget speech, there wasn't much of an acknowledgement of the continuing deep distress in the country. There is a reason why we keep harping back on the K-shaped recovery, that large sections of the society, of the economy, are still struggling. While the aggregate numbers might say that we are back to pre-pandemic level, when you get down to disaggregated data, you'll find that there's a lot of stress. I have with me also Ishan Bakshi, who writes on economic issues for the editorial pages, and at his own column, he keeps tracking the distress. So Ishan, has this surprised you that there is little acknowledgement for the distress that is there in the economy?
To some extent, it follows from what the economic survey also was, the way the economic survey is also shaped. There's little detail in both the budget and the economic survey on the extent of the unevenness of the recovery. You talked about the K-shaped recovery. Harish talked about Narega allocations as well, right? I mean, if your Narega allocations have gone down again from 98,000 crores to about 73,000 crores, so that self shows that, there perhaps is not an honest admission that the recovery is still uneven, right? That we have vast sections of the labor force, especially the informal parts, and the MSME sector in both the formal and the informal economy, who are still struggling and trying to get back to the pre-pandemic levels. So that, in a sense, is, you can see that trend in the economic survey and in the budget as well. That you would expected a certain amount of investigation, certain greater detail by both the finance minister and the economic survey, but that doesn't seem to be the case. There are a couple of other points that I thought I would mention. If you look at the budget at a glance, it assumes a nominal GDP growth of 11% for 22-23. Now, the economic survey yesterday was about 8.5% real growth. So either they're expecting the deflator to be at 2-3%. I mean, there's some not, this doesn't add up. Secondly, if you just look quickly at the revenue side, in 2022-23, the government expects 27.5 lakh crores as gross tax revenue. This is less than 10% growth from 21-22. So in a sense, it's lower than the nominal GDP that the budget has assumed. So the gross tax collections. I mean, you could say it's conservative budgeting, like last year, right? I mean, you underestimate the growth, and then it surprises you on the upside, and that gives you some fiscal space down the line. So it's an interesting point. I mean, they've again been conservative in their assessment when you compare it to their assessment of nominal GDP growth.
Right. So I just wanted to again tell the viewers that what the point that Ishan is making is that you typically set a nominal GDP growth number. You expect the nominal GDP to grow at a particular number. Suppose it is 12% or 11%, and the real GDP is typically then decided by removing the inflationary aspect, the impact of inflation. So if you were expecting 11% growth, nominal growth, and the inflation is only 4%, then you'll reduce that 4% and you'll get to the real GDP. So it looks like real GDP, if the inflation is something like 5.5%, then real GDP growth might be much lower. It would be around 6-7%. And that would have bearing on the on overall incomes in the economy. There's one question we have got from one of the people watching us, is what's there for the middle class in the budget? And I want Sandeep and Harish both to take a stab at it. Sandeep, what is there for the middle class in this budget?
I think it's a bit disappointing. I mean, the individual may be disappointed because there's not it is not a consumption push driven sort of budget. Also, if you see the K-shaped recovery that you also spoke about with it, I mean, the middle class and the upper middle class, they have been doing fine. In fact, also because of formulation of the economy, those segments have been doing well. It's the bottom 40% that ideally needs to be addressed, which is where the problem lies in the economy after the pandemic, especially. And I think the focus is on investment-driven crowding in of the private sector, investment, job creation. I think that is where the focus lies to bring the economy up in that sense. So there's nothing directly for middle class, so as to say. I think even on the consumption front, the maybe the push is that as more people come into the job cycle and all, I mean, with the investment-led growth, that will drive the consumption. I mean, already people who are consuming things, I mean, I don't think there's too much that can happen on that front. That is how I see it. Yeah.
Harish, is this an attempt to tamp down expectations in the salaried class? Every budget wanting a tax break or some kind of a SOP?
No, because as I said, this is an abnormally abnormal budget. I mean, it assumes that there are no scars from the pandemic and all these things. So you don't need. I mean, I think the assumption is that the fact that we will have a normal year without COVID and vaccination. So the assumption is that people will just start spending. That the only thing which was holding them back was because of they couldn't go to a hotel, they couldn't go. Basically, so the whole assumption is that people are all are actually holding a lot of money which they would now want to spend. So that at one level is quite disturbing. And the whole thing. Whereas I think definitely even middle class, some kind of a in terms of sentiment, and especially when we know from the CMI data, etc., the consumer sentiment is very poor, and we are seeing this especially last 3 months, right? I mean, the last 3 months, I think, and that's why even the HUL chairman, etc., he gave these things about the things. So it's a huge gamble. I mean, I think it's a huge gamble, both economically and politically. I mean, going to a UP election and no SOPs, nothing. I mean, it's a huge gamble. I mean, I think it's both an economic and a political gamble. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just to again take on what Harish is saying, it's a huge gamble politically because of how people might sort of see this budget. Because what the government is trying to do in this budget, you must understand, is that it's saying, I will put in the money upfront, and I will create the situation for the private sector to come in and join the party, right? There are question marks on whether that will happen or not, this crowding in. Ideally, it should happen, but there are question marks on whether this will happen or not, because the whole point of investment sustaining is if there is demand. And there is a big question mark on private consumption demand right now. That's one of the weakest elements of the economy. So, it's as Harish said, it's a gamble because politically people may see that you've not given us any relief and that there are scars and you've not put any paste on it and any help on that. And it's a gamble on the economy side because it's a bet you've taken that we will invest and that will lead to growth. But it may not. Ideally, it should, but there is an off chance. We've written stories on that issue. Before I take up another question, Sunny, do you have any understanding about the disinvestment data. That was one big bit. Is there any clarity on that?
Yeah, actually, we have to see the revised numbers yet. But just a broader point I wanted to speak about is that, privatization was a big element announced last year. But we have seen, apart from Air India and a couple of other smaller companies, the push hasn't really gone through. For example, the two banks they said will be privatized, and one general insurance company and IDBI Bank. So none of that has happened. In fact, for the banks, the legislative amendment has not even been brought in yet, even though there was a draft ready. So I don't know whether there is a pullback or a pushback from the farm laws that they had withdrawn. So because that was a big reform element. So while this budget talks about investment spending, the reforms, sort of stock taking has not been done. And what is the status on that? Because that is another element. Which is, I think, the missing piece, and disinvestment obviously will flow from that. So far they have about 10,000 crore they have raised so far from this year's estimate of 1.75 lakh crore. Now the government is hoping for the IPO of LIC, Life Insurance Corporation, but although there is speculation that the government plans to raise about 1 lakh crore from that IPO, but I doubt whether the capital market has that kind of depth and the pool to just do it at one go. Because we saw recently the Paytm IPO of less than 20,000 crore also struggled through. So disinvestment has been a challenge, and along with that, the privatization push that was expected has not come through yet. Maybe after post-elections they may start on it, but there is no indication yet. I mean, she didn't speak on that aspect, which was a hallmark of the last year's budget, if I may say, along with the national monetization pipeline, the privatization and the estimated 6 lakh crores of rupees, which was expected to come through the monetization of assets. So none of that. We don't have yet clarity on that. I think there is a pullback on those aspects politically.
Right. And if I may add, it was a year when we saw how the private sector, they raised money, IPOs, record amount of money has been raised, and government has not been able to do anything. It's the whole year we had a great bull market, and we couldn't do it. Now we are sitting at a peak, and the government is maybe thinking of raising huge money from LIC. At a time when the market is on its peak, and maybe everybody is just is also a bit nervous and edgy about the valuations and all. Also LIC, if there's a big bet, LIC is losing market share to private players. We are seeing that happening. So it is something that was missed this year. The government missed the bus while the private sector made merry, and they did the best.
I think there was one more disinvestment that happened. I think that took just a day before, that took the total number to 22,000.
But that money will not come to the government, because that is a disinvestment of say MMTC or other companies of government, and that money will also go in settling the liabilities of the company, which are, I think, about 5,000 crores. So we have to study that how much government gets from there. That will be a very small amount of the 12,000 crore, I suspect.
Right. There's one question from Shashank. I think, Sandeep, would you take this? He says that the tax on digital assets, 30% is TDS, or will it be included in other income? Can you explain?
So that's capital gains tax. It is not TDS. TDS is 1% on the transaction. That they haven't. I think with the budget documents, when we see, we'll get to know what is the threshold limit for that. So TDS will be 1% on the transaction amount that they will. We'll get to know. But 30% is the capital gains tax that that one has to pay. Yeah.
Right. Sandeep, I just wanted to add my own question in this, that if you were a exchange for these cryptocurrencies, would you be feeling sad today because there is an element of taxation? And typically the whole idea behind a crypto is that you want to go away from taxation, and that's the charm. So
I think there is a relief. There would be relief also, because there is sort of legitimacy to it now. that anxiety goes away. But taxation, I mean, that is fine. Taxation is always, I mean, it's a minor sort of hiccup that one has to overcome. I mean, that is how one has to see. If it's an asset class that really grows by leaps and bounds going forward, then I mean that 30% taxation won't matter. I mean, even though we saw long-term capital gains come to the stock markets, to stock investments, which earlier was not there. I mean, there has been no sort of. We have seen how investors have come into the market over the last couple of years, despite LTCG coming in place. So tax can be, I mean, a short-term sort of a hiccup, but I think in the larger frame of scheme of thing, I mean, they will see this as a that the legitimacy has come in, sort of thing, and that anxiety over what will be banned, blocked, and all that. I mean, that is gone. So that is how I see it. Yeah.
Thanks. Ishan, I want to come back to you. I was also looking at the data for, say, health. That is one big area which we thought that maybe the budget allocations might go up, or any of the education was another area which was of massive concern. In the speech, I could spot that there are a lot of there was a lot of time devoted to how to bridge the learning gap and stuff. But what do you make of it? Any sense you have about on health or education? Those are two key areas.
So, well, we have to look at the numbers in greater detail to understand how much the allocation has increased or decreased. But the broader thrust is whether the spending on social sector schemes, on welfare has increased or not. And broadly, from whatever Harish and you have been saying, it doesn't seem like there's allocations have increased significantly, if at all.
So, I mean,
so on this, just one more point on disinvestment, I could see the numbers.
Yeah.
So this year they have lowered the target from what Sunny was saying was budgeted 1.75 lakh crores to 78,000 crores now in the revised estimates.
Okay, so there's some realism there.
But it's perhaps possible that they're expecting LIC to materialize by the end of the financial year. Yeah. And next year they've lowered it even further to 65,000 crores. Okay. So the ambitious disinvestment pipeline and targets that they had been setting all this while, there seems to have been some scaling down of that.
Harish, the fact that private final consumption expenditure has been one of the weakest bits coming out of the pandemic, how crucial would that be? I mean, it's all very fine to say that, yeah, you're doing the capital expenditure route right now and you crowd in private investments, but how much of a threat or a challenge that is, the private final consumption expenditure being weak?
Yeah, see, you look at sale of two-wheelers, right, and also the fact that in many of your FMCG items, the grammage has come down. So definitely there is a pressure on incomes, and I think the whole thing seems to be relying on growth. The government will put in money that will in turn it'll in turn crowd in private investment, and then that will create jobs, and then that will create incomes, and then though that income will get spent. So we are talking of whatever, maybe 1 or 2 year. I think they are talking of Amrit Kal, right? I mean, 25 years. So, but hopefully it won't be 25 years. I'm sure. So the whole thing maybe for by maybe last year of this government's this thing, all these things will accumulate. The cumulative effect will translate into high growth and high jobs kind of a thing. I think that seems to be the entire calculation. But regarding the disinvestment, I think this seems to be a major political pullback, right? I mean, just 65,000 crore they are targeting, and as Sunny was saying, I mean, from a credibility point of view, last year that was the highlight of the budget, right? I mean, big bang privatization. We thought, and after that, and as Sandeep said, I mean, while the Nykas and Paytms and all kinds of Zomatos all mobilized here, we couldn't sell a single PSU. So I think that there is some kind of a political pushback also, and as you are also saying, I mean, the fact that there's no acknowledgement at all of the K-shaped recovery, and I think Ishan was saying that I think the economic survey also doesn't mention inequality and those kind of stuff, so I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I think
it's a gamble.
It's a when you hear a lot of student protest or youth unemployment protests are happening, and one of the things that we keep hearing from those students, is that governments pull back from the commanding heights, as it were, or the public sector's shrinkage will actually hurt public sector jobs, and that is something that a lot of young people want. They want a government job, and I don't know whether that has had some play in this. Ishan, how much of a threat is the again the consumption bit being weak?
So again, a lot of the growth momentum that we've seen so far would have been driven only by pent-up demand, right? Of perhaps the top decile of households in India, right? I mean, beyond that, there's not much purchasing power for high value commodity items of consumption, right? So, and that there's a limit beyond which that pent-up demand will not sustain. And once that sort of eases out of the system is when the scars of the remaining population, the remaining section of society will sort of show up. Sandeep had done this story, right, on the surveys, on the ICE surveys, on how, if I'm not mistaken, the bottom 60% incomes have contracted, right? It's not only the bottom 20, it's the bottom 60%. And that's a staggering number, right? Even if there is some data errors, I mean, the magnitude is not going to be much different, right, from what Sandeep has shown. I mean, and these are numbers which will show up in what Harish was saying, the FMCG sales, right? It's going to show up somewhere or the other, and it's going to start showing up in the private consumption numbers. Perhaps not in the first half again, because you'll have the base effect, you will have some sort of spending power again. But over the years, over the quarters, it will start showing up. And even the first advanced estimates, even after you grew at about 17% or 6% in this first and second quarter of last year, you're still nowhere close to your pre-pandemic level in terms of consumption. And if the aggregate consumption of the average Indian, right, what you've written about, is 2 or 3 years lower, then people below the average, I mean, their consumption levels would have been decimated.
Yeah. I mean, the number about, often we look at just the aggregate number of private final consumption expenditure, but in the stories we've also written about the per capita private final consumption expenditure. And you'll find that number having gone back to almost 2017-18 levels, and which is a very scary bit, because your whole investment strategy works on the presumption that there'll be demand, there'll be people buying it. But where is the income to buy it? Where is the desire, the purchasing power? Harish, there are a lot of questions coming on farming. Ironically enough, this was the year supposed to be when the farmers' income was to get doubled. And Harshit Mathur is asking, has the budget provided enough for that to happen? Obviously, one budget would not have done it, but your sense on that. And another person is Gyan is asking, what is special about for the agriculture sector and for the farmers? What is special in the budget? Any sense you can give?
I think the only thing they have offered is natural farming, and trying to say that, nudging farmers to move away from so-called chemical-based agriculture. But how much of this will be adopted on the ground? I mean, it remains to be seen. I mean, it sounds good. I mean, it's always nice to say that you should not have chemical-based agriculture and those kind of things. But to convince farmers is not very easy. And I would personally have liked the PM Kisan, the money to have gone up. See, right now it's 2,000 rupees, 3 installments. It could have been 3,000 rupees, 3 installments. That would have given a lot of fillip to, I think, to consumption. And plus, see, it would have benefited small and marginal farmers. And maybe some way of, bringing urea under NPS, capping procurement. So we should be going towards, income transfers, income support, rather than input subsidies and product-based kind of subsidies, market distorting supports. So I would like to see more action there, but unfortunately that has not happened. And there's no mention of even the committee. I think the Prime Minister had talked about setting up a committee for MSP. So the word MSP, etc., is not there. So I think from a sentiment point of view, it's not very great for farmers. And it will be so. Which is why I'm saying this is politically this is a huge gamble. Unless we are going to see something, in 2024 or something before the election. Yeah.
I think Sandeep wants to ask a question to you, Harish.
Oh my
Harish,
God.
just wanted to, for the urban poor, is the government totally counting on that? Okay, COVID will go, and the service sector will revive, and the demand will come back. What is the scenario there? While agriculture is there, but what about the urban poor who have been the biggest? We don't see anything there, no? What's your take on that? Are they just hoping? Is the belief there that okay, everything with COVID subsiding, everything will just come back on its own, the service sector and all?
Yeah, I suppose that is the assumption, that with the end of COVID, whatever contact-based services will resume. People will get back to work. There's nothing. So I think that is the main flaw in this budget. It doesn't assume. It assumes that there was no scars, nothing. And people are just waiting to get into the market. And then the fact that there'll be no COVID, that itself is a big stimulus. So it's a huge.
Let's hope it works that way.
Yes.
It is an all is well budget, and all will be better in a couple of years' time budget. There's we haven't. I was looking at the allocations for health and all these ministries. Health has very barely moved the needle, last year the actual budget had cut the health allocation by 10%. Now I'm seeing the revised data shows an increase by 10,000 crores, but I don't think that has gone up by much. Anyway, so I think I just wanted to check. There was some news about announcement about 5G spectrum allocation. Sunny or Ishan, one of you, can you make sense of that? What exactly is the opportunity there? Ishan?
So they're probably going to set up some sort of a calendar for the auction of 5G spectrum. But I think from the telco's point of view, the basic problem is of pricing, right? In the past, we've seen in various spectrum auctions that the demand has not been there because the spectrum was priced exorbitantly. So I think whether that pricing has been worked out or is under consideration, that will have a bearing on how the auctions go off.
There's one more aspect that for states, the government has relaxed fiscal deficit limits. How significant is that? Ishan, Harish, either?
So some sort of relaxation, I think, was probably needed. And even the 15th Finance Commission had laid down a glide path of bringing state finances back on the 3% trajectory, fiscal deficit trajectory over the next few years. So I think it's a continuation of that. I think there's some states will be given a little more breather based on the reforms that they do. The power sector reforms are one of them. So it's for some states, I think there'll be a slightly more relaxation.
Sunny, there was something about skilling also that was announced, a national program for skilling, some improvement there.
It's actually they're combining the various e-Shram and NCS portal, and then a combined skilling program will be launched thereafter. But that we'll have to see down the line how it's implemented.
Harish, there was something on vibrant villages also, and aspirational districts program. Any understanding you have on that? This vibrant villages thing?
Absolutely no idea. I haven't seen I need to take a look. Yeah.
Maybe the villages are vibrant already, and Okay, let's see if we have any more questions, or else we can bring this to a close. But broadly speaking, the notion is that the economy, the government hasn't sort of very explicitly acknowledged the kind of stress that was there in the economy, and made a massive bet on putting in a lot of capital expenditure and hoping that that will crowd in private investment, and that will be the investment vehicle will be the engine for growth. The only hitch in all of this is that investments will sustain only when businesses find that there is demand for their products, and only then will they join this effort. And that is the weakest part of the Indian economy right now. I think let's break it here for the moment. We'll go back to reading the fine print and check out all the stories tomorrow in the Indian Express, in the paper, as well on the website. We will be putting out more videos and more analysis. Thank you.